We welcome the announcement today from the Federal Treasurer outlining the terms of reference for this Productivity Commission review into the GST arrangements. We stand ready to fight for WA and to make sure we protect the deal that was entered into in 2018. There's no doubt without that deal, Western Australia would not be able to afford the economic infrastructure, the policies that continue to drive our economy and also drive new projects. We will argue that the GST deal entered into has to stay and will be the minimum in relation to ensuring the state has the ability to implement or to deliver the economic infrastructure, deliver the policies that support economic growth and also help drive the national economic agenda. This is very much going to be a Team WA approach. We've got a lot of interest through our key organisations like the CCI, like the CME, who want to partner with us in making sure we tell the WA story. We've seen an incredible feedback from the business community, and we want to work with the WA business community to again tell the WA story. We'll be now working to deliver and develop that submission, undertaking further economic analysis about the role of WA in the national economy. Also, as I said, putting forward a program of information, briefing all the key stakeholders, all the key media outlets, both in WA and nationally, and the Michael Barnes team will now be at work, both delivering and developing our submission, but also having a communication information program around the nation. Now, we know there are some economic commentators over east who want to pull down this deal, but we know that the federal government, we know that the Prime Minister very much backs this deal, but we want to make sure that our message is heard loud and clearly, in particular from some of those eastern state newspapers and also those eastern state commentators who want to tear down our GST deal. Even after the GST deal, we are still delivering $2.5 billion from WA to the other states. That's $2.5 billion compared to our population share. And of course, in relation to the total ins and outs of federal money into the state, we are still delivering $39 billion more revenue than we receive. We very much help subsidise the rest of the nation.
What if telling WA's story isn't enough here to keep what WA has with this deal?
I'm sure that, as I said, we have a federal government who understands WA gets WA, and I think if you look at the terms of reference, really is looking at how we can they can help us tell our story. It's about making sure, as I said, that states are not penalised for success, that states are given the ability to drive national economic outcomes. And we will point out some of the very absurd outcomes in the current Commonwealth Grants Commission formula. As I said, in relation to remoteness, that a town 300 kilometres away from Hobart can be treated with the same level of remoteness or determined to be as remote as an Aboriginal community in the middle of the Kimberley is absurd. There's a number of those types of inconsistencies. But the big point, and that's the key point, is that a state should not be penalised for success, but states need to have some incentive to continue to drive economic growth. Currently, you're penalised for driving economic growth, and that's what we don't want to see.
Is trying to convince the eastern states a losing battle, though? I mean, you've had the GST advertising blitz going already over there, I think. You've got the WA, or you've announced.
Yeah, announced.
Has it already been rolled out?
Not yet.
Right. You've got the WA embassy, though. I mean, you've been talking about this for years, and still the headline over East today is that it's the worst policy decision ever.
Well, we've got a big job to do, and that is, as I said, a very significant information program. As I said, what we'll be doing is asking our team, in particular Michael Barnes, the former Under-Treasurer, to go and meet with key commentators over East, describe the situation, let them understand all the key facts. We want to make sure that we reduce that pressure from over East, that pressure to change. And so we're going to do all we can to make sure the nation can hear our story.
When will the ad blitz start?
In the next few months.
You've mentioned the WA's impact on national economic growth previously. Is that really a factor here? I mean, GST is about bringing up relative funding for each state so they can kind of deliver the same level of service. So why is that argument actually going to pull any weight?
Well, I think so, because one of the key messages and the key themes that the federal government has been running and also has been discussed has been productivity and economic growth. And we had a roundtable recently. And a lot of that discussion was about how do we support new investment. Australia's in competition with the global marketplace for new investment. So a lot of the focus is how do we get better? How do we actually improve what we do to attract more investment? Currently, we're penalised. If we get more projects that support more iron ore royalties, then we get a significant amount of that redistributed. Other royalties, other revenue-raising opportunities are not treated that same. Why is iron ore penalised more than coal? There's all these absurd outcomes in relation to the formula. We want to point that out, and I think when you look at it, stand back from a public policy point of view, yes, it's assisting states to deliver services, but you also have to make sure you don't penalise and you don't discriminate against states that are actually out there trying to get new jobs.
One of the terms of reference is to come up with alternatives. Is there any alternative here that the WA government would accept that's not the current deal?
Well, that's our minimum, I would say. The current deal is our minimum. But in relation to the alternatives, I think it's also looking at the Commonwealth Grants Commission proper. So there's two aspects really. There's the minimum and the no worse off guarantee. And then there's the actual Commonwealth Grants Commission formula. So we'll be developing our submission or our campaign on both elements. There's not changing that minimum, the minimum amount to WA, minimum percentage. And then there's the Commonwealth Grants Commission formula itself. And as I said, we'll continue and we'll probably, as I said, as part of this information program, really outline some of the absurdities in the current formula so people can understand just the, I think, the absurd nature, the antiquated nature of some of their analysis.
A lot of the issues that economists have with the deal is that no worse off guarantee and the drain it has on the Commonwealth budget. Do you concede that it is a drain, or as long as the deal's delivering WA its fair share, are you happy with it in place?
Well, look, as I said, if you look at WA, if you look at what our state's doing in relation to the national economic agenda and the national finances, our analysis shows that in 23-24 financial year, $39 billion more was sent to the Canberra than we received. We really have to look at the entire context of this discussion and look at the fact that the company tax that these big projects pay doesn't come to WA, it comes to the nation. So in relation to the no worse off guarantee, the money that WA sends over, in particular the company tax, outweighs any of those costs.
Are Labor's 11 seats in WA on the line here? How many seats do you reckon you could hold if the GST deal was changed?
Now, look, I'm very confident that the Albanese government understands WA and backs WA, but we're going to make sure that that pressure that's coming from the other states is diminished.
Would it be zero if the WA deal was ripped up?
I'm not going to commentate on that, sorry.
But, politics is a factor here though, right? Because both sides of politics have promised to WA that this is guaranteed.
Yes, and that's why we're very confident with the federal government's stance on this. But what we're wanting to do is make sure that the eastern states newspapers, the commentators from over east, start understanding, or at least get told very directly, the real benefit of that GST deal, not only to WA but to the national economy.
Can I ask you then about Optus, the $100 million fine today, another embarrassing scandal for Optus. Does the stadium naming rights deal need to be reviewed?
As I said, our focus continues to be on the welfare, on the families, and also in relation to what happened with those 000 numbers. That is currently our focus, and that's what we're concentrating on at the moment.
But this is a separate issue. You can multitask. This is a separate issue. A $100 million fine handed to Optus that Premier Stadium is named after. It's embarrassing, isn't it?
As I said, there are families grieving. There are families going through a very difficult process as we start a coronial inquiry. and we've got the police team working with those families. That's our focus.
Is there a get-out clause in that contract? I know there's only 2 years left on it, but does the state have the ability to get out of it?
As I said, I won't commentate about the context of the contract. As I said, we've got 2 grieving families, and that's our focus.
What about CEOs that refuse to resign on the matter?
Again, I'll leave that up to the Optus board. I think the Prime Minister said he would be shocked if the CEO wasn't considering his future, and I'll leave my comments then.
The $500 million health fund, can I just ask one angle at it that I didn't think of it this morning? Were you quite pleased that the increased budget surplus left you in a position to be able to put aside more money than the racetrack? Like, you know, the opposition has said that they would divert the racetrack funding. Well, now you've come up with double that amount.
To be honest, it wasn't a consideration, but what we did consider is our ability to quickly respond. And as I said, our focus very much is on delivery. And with the new Office of Major Infrastructure Delivery team, the OMID team, the focus is looking at all of our projects we've committed to and how we can deliver them as soon as possible. What this fund allows us to do is then allow us to make decisions very quickly, and the Geraldton Oncology Unit is an example where, in relation to the variation, those numbers were presented to government and we're able to make a decision very quickly. So it wasn't a factor of our consideration, but it does again confirm that now we have $3.7 billion over the next 4 years just for health infrastructure alone.